says, so right now we have the police commanders. Sorry about that earlier. Somebody called me. It's annoying. I don't know why when somebody calls, it interrupts your screen recording. If it's on Do Not Disturb, then the call should be ignored and the screen recording should continue. But hey, I'm not a developer at Apple. It says ICE has accused Chicago police commanders of putting federal agents at risk after it was reported that officers had been instructed not to answer a call for backup from federal agents who said it was surrounded by protesters. So you have a lot of the police commanders who are just the local law enforcement in general who just don't want to cooperate with, these federal agents, okay? And it's causing a lot of trouble. It's making things harder for the administration. And this is all going to lead to the Insurrection Act being invoked. When you look up the Insurrection Act, all right, that's the first part of my lesson. I think who the person called was probably for a job interview, but, the work of the Lord must be done. When you look up the Insurrection Act, it says, the Insurrection Act of 1807 is the U.S. federal law that empowers the President of the U.S. to nationally deploy the U.S. military and to federalize the National Guard units of the individual, right? It says it authorizes the President to deploy military forces inside the U.S. to suppress rebellion or domestic violence. Okay, so you guys see where this is leading to, because when you look at the history of Rome and you look at the apostles and those that preached the Bible or those that preached the gospel, right? They were accused of sedition, uprising against the government. They were accused of sedition. Now, when you look up sedition, okay, is its language or action intended to incite rebellion, insurrection, or violence against the established government or lawful authority. Now, check this out. I don't know if ChatGPT will tell the truth, right? But let's see. Did the apostles get accused of the Bible get accused of sedition? Yes, several of the apostles were accused of sedition, rebellion, or incitement against authority, particularly by Roman or Jewish, which is Israelite leaders, who view their preaching about Yahushua as politically subversive because they were preaching about another king, another kingdom. And, they were saying there was no king but Caesar, okay? So that was what was going on. You had Israelites who sided with Rome because of the benefits. And they said, look, our king is Caesar. You guys are preaching about another king. And they started going to the Roman governors and the authorities and telling them about this man who has, let's go to Acts, the 17th chapter real quick. Okay, Acts 17. All right. In Thessalonica, right? This is Acts 17, and I'm going to start at verse, I'm going to start at 4. Oh, Spirit told me verse 5. But the Jews which believed not, moved with envy, took unto them certain lewd fellows of the baser sort, right? They were moved with envy. They were envy of the power of Yahushua, the glory and the gospel. Took unto them certain lewd fellows of the baser sort and gathered a company. They had a band of fellows and set all the city on an uproar and assaulted the house of Jason and sought to bring them out to the people. So they fucking ransacked the house, probably try to set fire to his house and destroying and vandalism, right? And when they found them not, when they were not in there, they drew Jason and certain brethren up to the rulers of the city, crying, saying, right, these that have turned the world upside down are come hither also, all right, whom Jason has received, and these all do contrary to the decrees of Caesar, saying that there is another king, one Yahushua. All right, and they troubled the people and the rulers of the city when they heard these things, because it was like, oh my God, how dare you say there's another king? You know, how dare you? You know, this is our king, Caesar. You know, how dare you come and preach about another king, about another kingdom? So this was the issue back then, and it's going to be the issue now, right? Because when things start going wrong in society, they're going to use the prophets, right? The men of the Lord, those that believe in the gospel, as saying, like, look, these are the men that have destroyed our society, because they're preaching about another country, you know, another society. They are essentially, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not sedition. It's another word. Sovereign. You know, we are essentially like sovereign citizens within Babylon, because we have our own set of rules that we follow. You know. So it says here, number one, it says Yahushua himself was accused of sedition. Before even considering the apostles, note that Yahushua was charged with sedition. Luke 23, verse 2. We found this man subverting our nation. He opposes payment of taxes to Caesar and claims to be a Messiah, a king. All right, this was a political charge, not merely religious, implying he sought to rival Caesar's authority. So naturally, his followers preaching Yahushua as Lord was seen as treasonous to the Roman state, where Caesar was considered Lord, you know, and Caesar was worshipped. You know, the Caesar was worshipped like as a Lord or a God. So the fact that they were preaching about another Messiah, another Savior, you know, that was treason. You know, it was treason. Okay. It says the apostles were accused of stirring up rebellion. Let's go to Luke 23 real quick. Just real quick, and read starting at verse 1 in GNT. This is Luke 23, verse 1. It says, Yahushua before Pilate. It says, the whole group rose up and took Yahushua before Pilate, where they began to accuse him, saying, you know, in the quotes, we caught this man misleading our people, telling them not to pay taxes to the emperor, and claiming that he himself is the Messiah, a king. Pilate asked him, are you the king of the Jews? So you say, answered Yahushua. So there you go. All right. You can't make this shit up, you know, you can't make this shit up. So we'll be charged with the same thing, you know, we'll be numbered with the transgressors, those that actually rise up and do something pursuant to 2 Esdras 15. Let's get that real quick. 2 Esdras 15, verse 15, it says, for the sword and the destruction draweth nigh, one people shall stand up and fight against another, and swords in their hand, for there shall be sedition among men, and invading one another, they shall not regard their kings nor princes, and the course of their actions shall stand in their power. So, all right, they're going to blame the men of the Lord, the prophets, right, for what's happening. We're going to get blamed for everything that's happening. They're going to say, you guys are the ones that riled people up with your preaching and your words to fight against the government. Because a lot of people in that day, especially those Bible Belt people, right, which, you know, some of them are Jakes, some of them are Edomites, right? Can't tell off of appearance, but, you know, they appear to be Edomites. They're going to go gun-ho against the government, because the Constitution, right, their rights, the Bill of Rights, is all going to be done away with, and that's going to anger them, you know. They truly believe in this whole patriotism and America, you know, first and whatnot, not knowing that the elites, they took off with the blessing. You know, they took the blessing pursuant to Numbers 24, and like is the first of the nations. They took off with a blessing and left the rest of their countrymen behind. But these people don't know. You know, they don't know they don't know what's going on. They don't know that they were set up by the elites. They have idea, no clue. So when they seen things crashing down, the country that their so-called forefathers fought for, they're gonna lose it and they're gonna try to rise up against the federal government. All right. You already see it now. A lot of Republicans are now turning against Trump because of him wanting to deploy military within the cities, and using it against American citizens. All right. And, you have a lot of Edomites that are fucking, they're happy that the Latin tribes, so-called like Latinos, they're getting all fucked up and bashed over the head. They're pretty much, celebrating that the Latinos are getting deported, not knowing that that shit is gonna come to your neighborhood too. You know, you think they're gonna just stop there? No, man. Everyone will be looked at as a domestic terrorist. That's the truth of the matter. All right, that's the truth of the matter. Everyone will be looked at as a domestic terrorist if you don't fall in line with the agenda. If you have a certain religion or faith, right? Because the Bible is going to be looked at as um, a treasonous book, and those that believe, right? Those that so-called believe in the gospel, Christian and whatnot, even if you're a Muslim, you're going to be looked at as enemy of the state, right? If you don't fall in line with the agenda, you will be persecuted, okay? And it won't stop. It won't stop at just the Latin tribes and, the so-called blacks, right? It will be pointing towards everyone. Uh, Point 2, it says the apostles were accused of stirring up rebellion. Acts 17, that's what we read. These men who have turned the world upside down have come here too. They're all defying Caesar's decrees, saying that there's another king, one called Yahushua. That's a direct accusation of sedition. The apostles were not violent revolutionaries, right? Because Yahushua commanded us to be what? Wise as serpents, harmless as dove. But he also said, what? That the ministry be not blamed, okay? Be not blamed. And this is what a lot of Hebrew Israelites out there that are not following. They're going up, they're fighting with people, right? Because of how they look, not knowing that these people could be Israelites, being carnal, This is 2 Corinthians 6, verse 3. It says, giving no offense in anything, that the ministry be not blamed. You're not supposed to be out there like a fucking brawler and fighting with people on the street and doing all these different things, beating people up and, carrying weapons while you're preaching. No, you're supposed to leave that behind. It's okay to have a gun, but don't have a gun on you when you're preaching. It's a bad look. It's a bad look for the ministry. And you got a lot of Hebrew Israelites out there that are just causing trouble. And they're going to be, they're going to give Esau a huge hand in setting up the narrative that we're just violent and hateful and this and that and all these different names to demonize the gospel, all right? The average person out there doesn't know that there are multiple groups within this ministry. They don't know. They don't know at all. At all. All right? So from there, let me see. Yeah, let me read 2 Corinthians 6, verse 3 again. It says, giving no offense in anything that the ministry be not blamed. So the most perfect example, right, was when Yahushua was being taken away. He didn't fight, He told Peter to put up his sword. He that lives by the sword, died by the sword, and all these different things. So he told Peter to put up his sword. Don't take out the sword and start, chopping people down and whatnot. He told him to sheath his sword, put it away, right? Because this was the will of the Heavenly Father. Essentially, it was the will of the Heavenly Father. So from there, let me go to go back to ChatGPT, right? Point 2 says, that's a direct accusation of sedition. The apostles were not violent revolutionaries, right? Because they followed the commandments of the Messiah, saying what? be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. But their message about Yahushua's kingship challenged imperial ideology. And that's the same way, because when they established this image, right, when they established this new system, all right, we're going to be challenging their ideology. To Roman officials, claiming another king was a political threat. It says the Sanhedrin accused them of subversion. The Jewish so-called religious council, which is just Israelites, accused the apostles of spreading dangerous ideas. It says, we gave you, that's Acts 5 verse 28, we gave you strict orders not to teach in his name, yet you have filled Jerusalem with your teaching and are determined to make us guilty of this man's blood. While not a Roman style sedition charge, it reflects how the apostles were viewed as destabilizing authority and provoking unrest, because the status quo was already set up. But when they came in and started preaching something else, it shook things up, you know. People wouldn't go to the Sanhedrin or the Pharisees or the chief priests anymore. You know, they would start losing their power. Paul's case before Roman authorities, it says the Apostle Paul faced repeated accusations of sedition or disturbing the peace. Or Tertullus, that's Acts 24 verse 5, accuses Paul before Governor Felix, saying, we have found this man to be a troublemaker, stirring up riots among the Jews all over the world. He is a ringleader of the Nazarene sect. That's essentially an accusation of inciting insurrection. And Paul defended himself by clarifying that his mission was spiritual and not political. All right? Let's go ahead and read that Acts 24. That's with the whole Felix, and he had Agrippa, right? And then he was preaching, and Agrippa said, you almost convinced me to become a Jew or a Christian. All right, this is Acts 24, verse 1. It says, and after 5 days, Ananias the high priest ascended with the elders and with a certain orator named Tertullus, who informed the governor against Paul. And when he was called forth, Tertullus began to accuse him, saying, seeing that by thee we enjoy great quietness, saying that, look, you know, oh great governor, you have brought peace to us, quietness, you know, we're flourishing. And that very worthy deeds are done unto this nation by that providence, you know, because the providence is like a region. So he's saying that they have done good things for the people, right? The Jews. We accepted always in all places, most noble Felix, with all thankfulness, you know, just kissing his ass. Notwithstanding that I be not further tedious unto thee, I pray thee that thou would hear us of thy clemency a few words. Let's look at the word clemency real quick. Clemency means mercy, lenience, right? So this dude is just kissing this dude's ass, you know, just like how Nehemiah and all the other prophets wrote letters unto Cyrus, right, asking to rebuild the temple. For we have found this man a pestilent fellow and a mover of sedition among all the Jews throughout the world, and a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes, who has also gone about to profane the temple, whom he took and would have judged, right, according to our law. But the chief captain Lysias came upon us, and with great violence took him away out of our hands, okay? So they're saying that this dude, he brought trouble, you know, he profaned the temple, right? And they're saying that he profaned the temple because he brought so-called Greeks, heathens, into the temple, not knowing that they were Israelites, but they didn't accept them because of their customs. They weren't raised, right, in the customs of the Jews, you know, the Israelite foreigners. Okay, you had Israelites that knew that they were Israelites who spoke Greek and did that, but they still kept the law. And then you had Israelites who did not know that they were Jews, right, Israelites, but they spoke the customs of Greek and they were Hellenized, essentially. Those Hellenized Jews, right, were brought forth into the temple, and they're like, yeah, what the hell are you doing? confound you, confound thee with a no nation. Okay, this is I don't know what happened to my Wi-Fi. Come on. Yep, there we go. Now Jeremiah 1 verse 17. Oh yeah, I will work in your days. Work in your days. Let's get that. This is Habakkuk 1 verse 5. It says, behold ye among the heathen, regard and wonder marvelously. For I will work a work in your days, which you will not believe, though it be told you. Okay. And that work was what? The Israelite foreigners coming back to the fold. Let me see. By a no people. Yeah, here it is. Deuteronomy 32, verse 21. It says, they have moved me to jealousy with that which is not the Most High. They have provoked me to anger with their vanities, and I will move them to jealousy with those which are not people. I will provoke them to anger with a foolish nation. And that foolish nation was the same people, right? But when you go into Romans, is that the 11th chapter? If I'm not mistaken, it talks about the olive trees, the wild olive tree, right? You had Jews that fell away from the customs and they became a foolish nation. Okay, that's the nation that the Lord provoked the regular Jews with. He provoked them to anger because even though they didn't grow up in the customs, they get circumcised, they still had a chance at salvation just by believing in Yahushua, and that messed a lot of them up because they were so steadfast in the law. They couldn't comprehend that, circumcision was of the heart and not of the, let's get that, circumcision. Okay. They couldn't comprehend that at all. Okay. This is Romans 2, verse 29. It says, but he is a Jew, which is one inwardly, and circumcision is that of the heart and the spirit and not in a letter, whose praise is not of men, but of Yahweh. Because you had a lot of men, right, of our people that were just keeping the law just to get praise of men. You had ones that, I'm trying to fix something. You had ones that essentially, because they were born of a particular lineage, or they had rights and privileges, they would start boasting themselves, essentially glorifying in that and putting people who did not have that birthright, putting them down, saying that they had no chance, they had no part in this. So Yahushua came in and he changed the status quo, and they did not like that because now pretty much everyone is essentially equal. Everyone is equal, and that took away a lot of their rights and privileges and whatnot. But it's beautiful history, and it's very important